VAs or virtual assistants are just a way that I've been able to grow multiple businesses and create systems and build teams. And it's honestly one of the things that I like the most about my entrepreneur journey so far. Well, hey guys, I am really excited. We have a special guest on today, Absalom. He actually is part of Andy and my main brand, our company. He is our chief marketing officer. So this is the first time that we've actually brought someone on the podcast that works with us. And so really excited to hear some of the insights that he's picked up and brought to the table from a different perspective. And I think it's going to be really valuable for you to hear what someone who works outside of the US thinks about working on an 8-figure brand at this point for a private label and what that journey has been like. So I'm really excited to bring you on, Abs. Welcome to the show.
All right. Thanks, Nate. My pleasure to be here today.
And Abs actually is normally in the background watching the podcast on with Andy and I. He's kind of like our semi-producer for the show. So he's usually listening and watching, but not on camera. So this is your time to shine, Abs. Don't be too nervous.
All right. I'll try not to.
Yeah. So welcome again to the Amazing Friend Podcast. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you go and sign up to be an insider. I'm really excited. I think this 4th magazine that we've released, it's featuring Liron Hirschkorn. Most of our listeners know who Liron is because we started the podcast with Liron. I think the first 150 episodes we did were with Andy, Liron, and myself. So obviously, Liron has been around forever in our community. But the last couple of years, he's been doing his own e-commerce agency, mostly focused on PPC, which we always talked about with Liron on the show. And he's just been crushing it. His company is called Incrementum Digital. I know a lot of our listeners use Liron for PPC or other help. And it's just a good showcase of what he's been doing and a testament to Liron started Amazon in 2014 and just his path along the way. It's really interesting to see how everybody kind of has a different Amazon path. But his is just been inspiring to watch. And Liron's such a hard worker that he just makes some awesome stuff happen. So if you haven't yet, go see that magazine. You can get it for free at amazingfreedom.com. Sign up to be an insider. You'll get access to that and all the other editions that we've had. Every single one's been really good. But I think every single month so far, they're getting better and better as we kind of get our feel for how to put together a quality magazine for that. All right, Abs. Welcome to the show again. Just to give a little bit of context, what we're going to be talking about today. Some of you know that I've hired something like 250 VAs over the last 5 years. I've actually lost count. And when I say I've hired that many VAs, it's not always me even personally hiring them at this point. A lot of times someone like Abs, who's on with us today, will actually do the hiring. Now, I still kind of de facto consider that me hiring them, since usually I'm working with them, they're working for me and I'm working with them right away. But I've probably done 100 something personal hires along the way in that time. And VAs or virtual assistants are just a way that I've been able to grow multiple businesses and create systems and build teams. And it's honestly one of the things that I like the most about my entrepreneur journey so far. We talk every week about Amazon and the power of Amazon, which is so true. In my head, building teams is like just as important and just as powerful as Amazon. You can think of these as vehicles. We talk about this a lot, how the Amazon vehicle of owning an Amazon business versus owning a Subway franchise or whatever else, right? There's a million different businesses you can do. The vehicle itself on Amazon is just so powerful that you could get started with low capital and become $1 million seller within a year. We see a lot of people in the Amazon seller tribe do that. Most people take a little bit longer than a year, but it's possible, right? And that's just not even possible with a lot of other businesses out there because the vehicle isn't powerful enough. Amazon is. Well, this is similar. The vehicle of building teams, if you try to do everything yourself, you're so limited. If you start building teams, and that could be anywhere, it could be in the US, it could be in the Philippines, it could be in Europe. I don't care where, right? You can build them from anywhere. It's just the idea of building a team and all the systems and processes that go into that. It's really about leveraging other people within your business in a positive way that's mutually beneficial, but leveraging the time of others to help build your business. So That's what I've done. I think building teams is super important. I think most people still have a hard time getting over that initial first hire hurdle. Or maybe you have US employees and you've never made the leap to a virtual assistant, or maybe you have one and you're or 5 or 7. You're wondering, hey, at what point do I start building kind of leaders within my team? And that's what Abs has been for us. He is a leader within our team. So, Abs, welcome to the show again. Introduce yourself, and I kind of want to hear a little bit. So you're located in the Philippines. Kind of walk us through, how did you get to the Philippines, real quick? A little bit of backstory. How did you get there, and how did you become a VA essentially?
Gotcha. Okay, so Absalom is the full name. I flew to the Philippines say 10 years ago. Yeah, it's already 10 years. I came here initially to study. So I took my BSc in the Philippines because obviously it's an English speaking country and they have really good education here. After studying, I left, went back home, and then decided to come back here because I had a business venture here, and that didn't really go so well. They eventually got into working remotely for US based businesses. That's basically how it started. And I've been with you guys now for 2 years plus, I think. Yep.
Yeah, so you're not a native to the Philippines, but you've been there for 10 years now, and so you've definitely been immersed in the culture, and you see things obviously from a totally different perspective than Andy and I. Still have never been to the Philippines, which is, I'm kind of ashamed to even say that at this point because it has been so long. Was seriously planning on going there within the last year or two, but COVID happened, and just never happened the way we wanted to. We still plan on being able to get over there and having a big party with our 60 plus active team members that we have at this point, right? So we're still looking forward to get there, but you have lived and breathed the Philippine culture for the last 10 years. So I definitely am interested to get your perspective there, because there are little, one of the greatest things about working with Filipino VAs is that culturally they are very similar to the US, just because of the history of US influence in the Philippines, the naval bases and everything else that's been there, right, for the past, really since I think like World War II, around that time frame, where the U.S. culture just really started to be prevalent there, and so that makes it so easy to work with VAs in the sense that English is like a second language of most people there. They have similar beliefs and lifestyles in some ways as U.S. people, obviously in a different country setting. So it's not exactly the same, but there's a lot of similarities. That being said, I think sometimes we take for granted the similarities and we don't recognize some of the cultural differences. So let's start there, and then I'll get to some tactical questions about how our listeners could leverage VAs. But what are some of the main things culturally that you've learned living in the Philippines last 10 years that you think, and I will say this, Abs knows a lot about American culture, probably more than some Americans do. Like, he knows more about politics than I do. So Abs is a little bit more well-versed than maybe the average person is, just because he's a lifelong learner, lover of knowledge and all that. So he, I think, gets a good perspective of both ends. But what culturally do Filipinos, what's maybe different, or something that someone like me might not realize at first working with Filipinos?
Well, I think the one thing that makes Filipinos unique, which I consider their strength also, is the fact that they are very empathetic. They're very emotional. And that's not a bad thing at all. And it makes them very dedicated at the same time. So you work with a Filipino and they literally could start calling you dad, like if you get that close with them, which in America is probably weird, an employee calling you dad or something like that. Or you work with someone who's older and they start calling you like a son or daughter. But that's because of how emotional and how involved they are. And so sometimes if you don't understand that, you either would take that negatively, or you would take that to be them being too playful at the same time. So I think that's the one thing that makes Filipinos unique. And so you could say a Filipino work for somebody remotely they haven't met before, and they've been there for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And I think you have a couple of people that have worked with you for that long, and it's because of how committed they are, and it makes them unique. But also, English is, I would say, for different parts of the world, English has different meaning. You could say one word, and to an American it means something. And I know we've had issues where somebody on our team was emailing some of our manufacturers and they used words that sounded like they're being rude, but in the Philippines it literally meant they were trying to be persuasive. So those are like some of the little things you have to adjust to understanding what certain words mean. But beyond that, I would say Filipinos are some of the most amazing people you could work with anywhere in the world, and they are everywhere in the world, obviously. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's clearly been my experience and why I've continued to work with so many great people that, yeah, have been with us for years. I'll say our churn rate of team members is there's obviously a churn there like every business, but I would say relatively low, probably compared to a lot of other businesses our size. And we have had a lot of people now with us for over 2-3 years, and so it's really cool to build those bonds over time. I know at times too when you've talked about this before, um, Abs. I forget what it's called, but like the what's the
Power
country
distance.
dominance
I think it's
level
power distance index. I
power
hope
distance
I'm
index.
using
Yeah,
the
yeah.
right word here.
I've learned that before, and I totally forget the name of it, but I think you have it right there. So in the U.S., it's very high or low. I can't remember.
Right. The power distance index measures the degree to which members of a group or society accept the hierarchy of power and authority. And usually in places like Asia, it's usually really high, and places like in the US is pretty low. And I think I came in contact with this word from Malcolm Gladwell, one of his books, where he was mentioning how flight pilots were crashing more in Asian countries in the past because when they communicate with the towers, they are so respectful and so, please, can I land? While a US person be like, dude, I need to land right now. And so, yeah, that a Filipino could literally be in pain and try to be so smiley and please, I really need to do this when they should be forceful sometimes. And I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's another cultural thing that you'll notice when you start working with Filipino team members. Many are just so eager to please in a good way, just almost like not just because they're a nice person, which is usually the case also, but because culturally that's just like expected and part of it. Where in the U.S., it's all about individuality, freedom, and it's probably a lot easier to make American feel like they're being mistreated or not getting. It's kind of like a pride thing. I feel like almost like a pride humility is another way to say that power index a little bit. So I think that's been the experience of a lot of people I've talked to as well. Again, everybody's different, so I don't want to group all people into one bucket because that's called, obviously not the case. Everyone has a different level, but in a general rule, you'll tend to see that. Okay, so Abs, as we get into some tactical stuff, in your experience now, you've worked for a bunch of different companies in the last 10 years.
Yep.
At one point, you actually worked for a BPO company, I believe, right? So
Yep.
BPO is
I did.
business processing outsourced. That's kind of where like 10 years ago, before a lot of entrepreneurs like me were hiring people in the Philippines, it was these massive BPO companies that were set up to have like 1,000 team members that were half of them were working for AT&T and the other half were working for some bank. And that's kind of the way that most Filipinos got introduced to in remote work, I would say, but they were at the office typically. So they're not working
Yep.
from home, but they're
Yep.
remotely helping some US business. That's kind of how it started. And it's definitely changing, I think, where more and more people are working for small businesses, essentially. But you worked at a BPO company. Tell me what that's like. And would you recommend people looking for someone who has BPO experience or not, just as a general kind of aside?
Well, it's obviously or usually really good to get somebody who has some BPO experience because first of all they understand the culture more too. So they've worked with Americans. A lot of the BPO companies here have Americans as the site managers or Europeans depending on the company. And so yeah, BPO experience is useful, it's important, and necessary, but it's not a must for sure. The BPO environment here. It's not as cutthroat as you would assume. They have quotas, you have things you have to meet, but it's just a good breeding ground for some very important roles like customer service. So think of the guys that always call you to render by your credit card bills or stuff. A lot of those calls usually come from the Philippines in the past few years, and they taught them really well with some really robust SOPs and systems, what to say, how to say it, how not to say it. And so if you get somebody with that kind of experience to come manage your customer service and you're just a small business, they would definitely do a really good job because of their level of experience. And so, but I also, in my few months experience there, I was more in the HR side. So I looked at hiring, firing, training, and how they do some of those. And they have some really robust systems because they get audited regularly from both the client and the management company out of the country.
And from an employee perspective, working there, if all else being equal, you're getting paid the same. Working at a BPO company versus working at a small business, like what would be your preference and
Oh,
the
definitely
main
a
reason
small
why?
business. Definitely a small business because BPO is like working in a factory. You have hundreds of sometimes thousands of people working together. You all go in by this time, come out by this time, and it's literally like working in a factory. While for a small business, you build a bond, you build a relationship, you get to know who you're working for, you get to understand the business personally. You want to do good because you care about it, but most BP employees don't. They just want to get to that quarter and get paid, and that's it. Because they know nothing about the company they are working for. They just want to do what they have to do, and that's the difference, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's a big advantage then for us people listening to this, is that if you find someone who is already employed or whatever, or looking between jobs, and they have two different options, one's to go work for a BPO company or you, even if you're not paying them as much, in some cases you might have that the edge in hiring, just because you can give a more positive work environment experience. And typically this kind of changed a little bit from COVID, but almost always, like you said, it's like working at a factory. You would have to go to the office because someone's like staring over your shoulder basically at all times. Whereas just like in the US, I think everywhere in the world, people want to be able to work from home, be around their family more. And then something else that a lot of people don't think about is, Abs, you're in the Metro Manila area, right? The traffic is terrible there, right? It's like being in the, I don't know, New York Metro or Dallas or something, where it's just terrible here. So a lot of people, I mean, you commuted at one point, or you never did personally?
I think I did at one point, but it's terrible. It's terrible. Yeah.
A lot of people that are on the team right now have come from a place where they were, driving an hour or two to work each way.
Yep.
And so, or taking some kind of public transport, I'm sure. So that's a huge advantage as well, if you can get someone working from home. All right. So where would you recommend people go to look for VAs? I've talked a lot to people about onlinejobs.ph, and that's where we continue to get quality VAs all the time.
Right.
Any other sources you would recommend, just in your experience, that people could go to look for talent?
Well, yeah. Well, onlinejobs.ph is a good place to start, just because you know what you're looking for, and they're all there. But Facebook is another really big place where you find a lot of job seekers. There are a bunch of Facebook groups that are specific to certain job types. So you could find a Facebook group just for Amazon, and everybody there speaks the Amazon language, understand PPC or listing, depending on what you're looking for. So Facebook group is there. You also have LinkedIn. So the bunch of people on LinkedIn that are trying to get jobs on LinkedIn, and so you could search for a keyword. If you're looking for, say, an Amazon account manager, you type that, and you could even select the Philippines, and you could see a bunch of people who are either open for jobs, or are currently working somewhere. You could talk to them and potentially get them to transfer. We also have places like Indeed, and obviously Fiverr, freelancer.com, those regular or popular freelancing sites. You could also still find people there. But when you get candidates from places like LinkedIn and Facebook, usually you sometimes get more qualified or better candidates, and like online jobs too, because some of those platforms, it's built on sort of credibility and reputation, and you want that. You want people who are vetted by community, and are pushed forward when you look for the best candidate.
Yeah. I was just at the Tribe 7 meetup in Springfield, Missouri a couple weeks ago, and I talked to a lot of people about VAs. And one of the most common questions I think people have is they hire someone and they're just not sure whether the person's doing a good job yet. And if you don't have a lot of experience, it's hard because you don't have this benchmark. At this point, it's been easier for us because we've hired hundreds of people. So you kind of start to get an idea whether someone's good or not pretty quickly. But you personally, what do you look for when you're hiring someone new to work on the team? And like, how long does it take you before you feel like someone's going to be good and work out long term? What are some of the signs you look for?
Full disclosure, we've made a lot of mistakes ourselves in hiring in the last 2 years of hiring regularly.
That's for sure.
But recently, I think we sort of have found our sweet spot. And I was listening to somebody talk about this. I think Cody Sanchez, this lady that has really good content around marketing and business. And something she said, she always looks for the energy. Do you bring the energy and you take energy away from her during interviews. And I think that has worked for us lately, where the one thing I'm looking for right now when I'm talking to somebody on an interview is not where did you go to school, how much experience do you have, it's how much energy do you bring to this conversation. Like, you get on a call with some people, they're distracted, they're not prepared, their mics aren't working, their video is up and here, and you ask them questions and they just seem so distant and distracted. That's a red flag. Just don't move forward with that person. And the next thing is, do they have enough energy? Are they excited to talk to you? Does it seem like they're prepared for this interview? Are they, like, when you see that, immediately okay, this person, the first box has been checked. The next thing is, are they the right fit for my culture? And if it's just you as as the employer, does this person have the kind of energy I would like to work with? And if you can answer those two questions immediately, training, it's easy. Filipinos can learn anything really fast. I think we've seen that with like one of our rock stars who is crushing it on the Amazon side. Filipinos can learn anything in 2-3 weeks. They could understand the business. But the question is, does this particular person you're interviewing have the right energy? Do you feel like you could work with them? Do you feel like a sense of synergy in that first conversation? Because usually, a good person in the first 30 seconds you meet them. And that's what we've been doing now. First 30 seconds, we feel like this person has the energy. And the next question is, do they have sort of the cultural fit with our culture? And if we can go past that, they have the right experience to execute on the task, or are they trainable? And then the next question is, when do we begin to see results? And recently, or in the past, we usually get to measure success of a new hire in 30 days, with 30 days to figure out if this person is good. But now, something I started doing earlier this year was, the first interview you do with somebody else on the team. By the second interview they have with me, and in that second interview, if I feel like this person has what it takes, the energy is right, culturally they seem like they fit, the experience set is there, I usually tell them, how soon can you start? And they're like, I can start anytime. You sure? Start right now. And when you do stuff like that, you see people who, first of all, are goal getters. They want to do something and they're excited to do stuff. And we've had some of our best team members start on the spot. And by the second, third day, we have this really, good Excel spreadsheets we used to track, like, what they do, how they do it. And usually by the second day, if this person is going to be a good team member or not. The first day, maybe they have to set up with their communication channels and softwares. But by the second day, they're either calling you, texting you, messaging you, hey, what am I doing today? What training do I have to go through? If you don't see that by the second day, it's not going to work out. It doesn't matter if people say they take some other people to get used to the system or get used to the company. By the second day, if a team member is going to work out based on the amount of energy, how enthusiastic they are, how persuasive and how much they want to do stuff. So right now it's easier. Like, I could literally be in an interview and know if this person is going to work out, and it's because of hiring hundreds of team members and failing for a bunch of them. And I feel like we've found that source now.
Okay, I just want to recap what you said right there, because I think it's kind of crazy. And most people, I've never done this, right? So I hired lots of people, but I think you did this before me, where you hired someone on the spot and then you said, can you start right now? And I think it's just like human nature. You want to stop, think about it, mull it over. But a lot of times, like you said, you don't need that. If you're moving quick, if someone is the right feel, it's like, hey, if you're serious about wanting to start right away, like, how about right now? Let's get you onboarded and let's start working, going through stuff. And so you feel like when you've done that, it's kind of a sign that the person is more committed, more serious. Like, why having them start right away? What kind of signal has that given you?
I think it gives all the signals. And just to clarify, we have somebody who is like a full-time HR person. Mostly that start right now doesn't necessarily mean they get to do the job immediately. It means they get set up, their contract and all that stuff. But the yes, I can start now. Yes, I'm available right now. It tells me, first of all, they are willing to commit to it immediately. It tells me they are ready to, get the ball rolling. And it just gives you all the right signs. Now, the people who will go, can I start on Monday? It doesn't mean we don't hire them. Like, sure, let's start on Monday, or let's start in 2 days or in 3 weeks. But usually the team members are like, yes, I'm ready. Let's do it now. We found that they are usually rock stars. And yeah.
Yeah, so it's just another signal to you that there's potential here. So you mentioned several good pre-screening items that I think are helpful. And then you mentioned that by day 2, you feel like you know whether someone has that energy level at least, and kind of that proactiveness. What else, just to kind of finish up this thought, what's the longest you now after a lot of mistakes, and again, we're still learning this ourselves, but trying to pass along what we've learned, maybe just one step ahead of someone listening to this potentially. What's kind of like the longer time frame? Obviously, we're doing evaluations and stuff along the way every kind of 6 months, more formal, but what in that first initial, when you're just trying to figure out, is this person actually going to be worth sticking with at a long time frame? What advice could you give around that?
I'd say you should be able to figure that out in 2 weeks, because you spend a lot of time training new team members. Sometimes the first 2, 3 weeks you're still training. By the second week, if you're not sure, you should probably not move forward, because by the 1 month mark, 2 month mark, you've already wasted so much time and energy on that person. So I would say you should know what. First of all, obviously, before you hire somebody, you want to have the right job description, which I cannot overemphasize this. Sometimes you just know, oh, I need a social media manager. Oh, I need an Amazon account manager. But what's the exact thing they will be doing? And if you could have a proper job description and know what the day-to-day task looks like, it allows you evaluate team members better. Like somebody joins your company for the first time, it's just you and this person. What would they be doing? How would they be doing it? If you have that figured out, then it's easy to monitor and know, okay, are they doing the good job? And by the second week, you should be able to figure that out. But yeah, so 2 weeks is the time frame I would say it takes to know if somebody is the right fit. Now, for certain roles that you probably are not super involved with, it takes longer, or roles that need sort of more results to be shown. But I would say culturally, and when it comes to like the type of energy they bring, 2 weeks is enough time to know if this person is the right fit. Now, being the right fit for your company may not be the same thing as being the right fit for a particular role, right? You could get an amazing team member who could literally help you scale your business to 6, 7 figures, but you didn't get them for the right role. I think also understanding that when you bring people in, it's super valuable. I didn't come in as chief marketing officer. I came in as something on social media, right? And we saw that I could do more, and we kept doing more. And I am here. We've had team members who came in as copywriters, and now they are creative directors. And so if we felt, okay, you're not probably the best in copywriting, and we fire them, we wouldn't have gotten the result we've gotten from looking at where we felt like they are best at, and moving them there. So getting the right person, I think I would say, is even more important than getting the right candidate for a particular role, because the right person, you could put them in the right role eventually, and that's what you need for your business.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but we're trying at this point where we're at to really look at our accountabilities across our whole company, and do we have the right people in the right seat, which goes back to several business books on this. But are we getting the right people there? And maybe we have some of the right people, but they're in the wrong seat. Just another way to say what you just said there. So 2 weeks, and just to recap what you said, 2 weeks doesn't mean that they're going to know everything they need to know about the business or their job. But at 2 weeks, you should have a pretty good idea whether this is that right person for the company. And I'll agree. And I think the easiest way to do that is just to be upfront with people right away. So as you're hiring them, you say, hey, can you start now or tomorrow or whatever it is quickly? And we have a 2-week trial. And at the end of 2 weeks, we're going to evaluate whether this is the right fit. So nothing is guaranteed beyond that. It does make it easier if you don't tell people that, and after 2 weeks, you kind of feel like you're firing them. Whereas if someone, you go 2 weeks and they just aren't working out, it's kind of like they just didn't pass the trial. So it's a little bit of a different feeling there, and it is easier to just say, hey, we got to keep looking. And so I think that's something I've had to learn over time, but really works much better. Okay, any other, before we get into tying this to private label and using this to kind of build a brand or get started with the brand, any other just tips that you could give in your experience last couple of years, how U.S. employers who are maybe hiring for the first time or kind of trying to scale up their delegation of tasks, what are some key things that you think would help someone thrive when it comes to working with their VAs?
I think it goes back to something I just said earlier, having the right job description, knowing exactly what you need help for. And I also understand if you are running your business by yourself, sometimes you don't know what you need help with because you need help with a lot of things. But I would say it's what's the most important thing that you need to let go of. For example, I think you said this a lot, Nate. Customer service was one area you and Andy had to be on the phone all the time. It takes a lot of time. You have to do it because it's important for the brand, but also somebody else could easily take that over. And I think that's usually like some of the first places to look at. How do you get the right person to do that job that could easily be outsourced or taken over? While you focus on the most important things. And for a kind of business, it's new products and getting in touch with the right manufacturers. And that was like the important part with scaling and growing. And so all the other part, like customer service, social media management, all the basic stuff, Amazon account managers, you could easily hand that over to people. So understanding what you need help with, and then breaking it down to what exactly has to be done to get to what you consider successful for that particular task or role, and then beginning to look for somebody and get somebody and figure out how to measure them properly, and that's how you start, and you just figure it out from there, I guess.
And that's a good way to tie it to some practical stuff on this. So you mentioned customer service. I totally agree. I think for most people with any type of Amazon business, arbitrage, wholesale, private label, you're probably answering some kind of customer service email. And even I was just talking to someone else at the conference again who runs a pretty large private label brand. They've done arbitrage in the past, but this person is 7 to 8 figure kind of towing the line. And he was talking just about the struggle still sometimes of answering like these important customer service emails. He didn't even call it customer service. He just said like these important emails, but they really were customer service. He was just thinking like he had to answer them because it was like 7 p.m. at night. Everybody at the office was done with work. So he had to answer it. And sometimes it was like receiving a container at the warehouse, or like some kind of, not even a container, like some kind of shipment, and nobody else could do it but him. And I was kind of talking through it with him, and I was like, hey, you just have to like hand this off to another team member, make it them responsible. He had mostly US employees, but those types of things definitely for VAs are like the easiest things to pass off and feel like you're just getting tremendous value for that team member, what they're bringing to the table doing that. I do want to talk about another role, and that is using VAs to be your main point of contact with Chinese manufacturers. And that was actually one of the first hires. We hired a customer service back in 2019 for our main brand that we talk about all the time on the show. Then the next hire we had was a supplier communications person, and basically supply chain worker to talk to all of our Chinese manufacturers. And there's so many benefits of using someone in the Philippines or having a team member in the Philippines for this. And probably the biggest one is that they're on the same time zone. So it's so easy. Now, a lot of our VAs work at different shifts. Abs, you work the graveyard shift, so you're on all night your time, right? And you're just used to it at this point, and a lot of team members are. But some team members, that's a struggle, right? It is some form of a struggle to work all night for most people. You seem to handle it pretty well, Abs. For some people, it's a real struggle. But Lou, she's our supplier communications with all our manufacturers. She gets to work basically. She gets up early, but she works with the manufacturers on the same shift. And this is one of those roles that in the beginning, Andy and I thought we could never hand off. We were like, talking to the Chinese factories, there's just so many little things to deal with that a VA, right? And I say that to say like this was like my limited small thinking back just a couple of years ago was they wouldn't be able to do this, right? And Lou's done a tremendous job, and essentially she can handle 90% of the communication, and then the 10% that she can't handle because it's just bigger decisions, and she probably could handle even more, but just because they're really big decisions, she'll bring to us to like a weekly meeting that we have, and we'll figure those out together. So Chinese manufacturing is definitely one. Any thoughts on that, or any other critical roles you've seen just be like easy wins for those who are like, hey, I have so many things to delegate, but I don't know where to start first when I'm building my brand. Anything else you can think of?
Well, I think the Chinese outsourcing or the Chinese communication is very important. On the podcast, we always talk about finding and launching new products, and I think somebody was asking a lot some questions on our social about how do you spend time finding manufacturers in China, and this is one of the ways. Like literally, Filipinos or remote team members are as smart as you could think of. Like they are really smart. You could literally tell somebody, "Hey, here's the product I have in mind. Go find the cheapest, the best, and give them a list of criteria and do some robust research. communicating with these guys on WeChat and everything, and give you a long list of manufacturers. And if you want to launch new products, you want to scale your business, and you don't have somebody who is just focused on doing that, then I think that's one of the most important roles you probably would want to get. And just tying that to what we try to do here on the podcast, that's really how you talk to 20, 30, 40 manufacturers in China that are on a different time zone with that role. And you then have some other roles like Amazon account management, basic stuff, right? Making sure your listing is done right, making sure your images, your creatives, all those stuff you probably do by yourself, trying to get the right image or the right copy. Again, those are roles you could easily outsource. Just think of your Amazon operations side as the most important part, but then the marketing side as the part that you could easily just outsource to anybody else. And I think that's the best way to look at it. So operations, all the big decisions you have to make, product you have to sell, all that stuff. Marketing side, images, copy, listing, all that you could easily outsource them to people who have done this for years already, and they are everywhere in the Philippines looking for opportunities.
And again, I was talking to some people at this conference recently, and I think they had this struggle. Like, I have so many things to do. What's the first role I should hire for? And I think that is going to be unique to everyone. What's your opinion, Abs? And you've seen a lot of different stuff, but what's your opinion of, and I know you haven't quite seen this, I guess, with our business at this point, because we've just been kind of growing so fast and having so many team members lately, but try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is a solo entrepreneur right now. They're doing it all themselves. What do you think about hiring someone that's kind of like your general VA that's like just doing a little bit of everything for you versus trying to like specialize them in some very key roles? What would be your advice?
I think that's probably where the term VA came from, virtual assistant, and they assist you with everything, right? For I think in the last few years ago, VAs were mostly literally people who help you schedule appointments. Like that's like the way it got big 4 or 5 years ago. Appointment setters for like dentists and stuff, and it got into becoming social media managers and everything
And can I
else.
say, like Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week, he kind of introduced this concept, I think, that book's like 15 years old now, right? So he was kind of like early on it, and that's how he talked about using them, right? Like he was like,
Right,
have a VA manage your inbox and appointments. And I think at the time that was like the furthest you could think about like going with a VA. It was like kind of
right,
these little mini
right.
hacks to make you more productive, right?
Right, exactly, and so for a small business, one person operation, you could literally get somebody who, especially if you're only focused on Amazon, one person who's like your general VA. They do everything. They do listing. They talk to manufacturers. They talk to suppliers, and yeah, you could absolutely start from there. And then as you get bigger, you begin to add some more roles to it, to like specialize in certain areas. But yes, and the good thing about Amazon roles and for Amazon businesses is everything sort of works in tandem. So somebody who understands account management, or understands creating case logs and everything else. And so yeah, probably it's one of the first roles to get if you're working alone. But if you have a bigger operations, you have more SKUs and more product, and customer service. Like I said before, you could easily just outsource that. And then look at your overall marketing side of things. What do you need to get more visibility, to rank more, to get more sales? They begin to look at those roles, and those roles are everywhere, with really, really good people in the Philippines.
We've been talking the last couple of weeks that in this show, we always want to be talking about how to find private label products, right? And today we haven't covered that as much. We've been talking about how to basically run your business easier, but I do want to kind of tie it together with that because I feel like most people who struggle finding their first private label product, it's just because, it takes so much time initially, right? It's definitely a long-term investment. You can spend hours and hours and weeks and months potentially trying to find the right product. But once you do, if you are successful with it, it could pay off for years, or it could turn into this brand you eventually sell or whatever, right? It can really pay off big, but the upfront investment is high. And that's always hard for any type of business or really anything in life, right? Whenever it requires like a really big upfront investment, it's tough. And so I feel like that is private label or building a brand versus some other sides of Amazon or ventures. So what I'll say here is that for most people, I think that they just don't have enough time. They're struggling right now, already being maxed out, family, work, everything, right? We all have the same type of struggles, but we also all have the same number of hours in the day. And that's kind of what I want to hit on here to tie this up, is to say, I feel like most people probably have things that you are doing in your day that you could hand off to a very capable VA that would literally free up an hour to 3 hours for most people of their day every single day for, let's say, 5 days a week if you're on like kind of a normal work schedule. So let's say you are able to free up just an hour of your day every day because you hand it off to a VA. You then could do an hour of private label research, spending time in the catalog, looking at your hobbies, looking at your interests, all the stuff that we've talked about in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 episodes. If you go back and listen to them, the question a lot of people have is, yeah, but how do you spend the time? How do you have the time to be able to do that type of research and looking? Well, I hope this episode helps you consider maybe this is one of those ways. Write down everything that you're doing on a daily basis right now, or create like a spreadsheet schedule of all of your tasks. See which of those are absolutely essential for you to do and which ones could be handed off to someone. And also try to like arbitrarily assign a dollar value to each of those tasks that you do. Some tasks you do might be $100 an hour. Some literally you'll realize are like $3, $4, $5 an hour tasks because they could be handed off to someone else. And then just try to organize those. And then this is my last tip I'll say on it is, don't just do it from like a dollar standpoint, but look at it from an energy standpoint. Which of these do I like doing? Which of these things could I do and like have a lot of fun doing it, and the time goes quick and I'm good at it? And which of these things maybe I'm good at it, but I hate doing it? And for a lot of people, that might be like bookkeeping or customer service, like we talked about, right? Some people are good at it, some people hate it. I'm not really like a customer service type of person. We have some customer service team members on our team that don't love probably all parts of their job, but they genuinely enjoy like helping people and being on the phone. And so like they're just better than me at that role. Our head customer service team member in the Philippines, like, could help customers way better than I can, right? She's just better at it than I am. So look at it that way too. What do you like versus don't like? And consider how could you hand that off? And this might give you that extra hour a day you need to find your first private label product. So that tied it together, somewhat well, right?
Yep, that
Okay.
did. That did. Yep.
All right. I was trying to get in there. This is still how do you find your first private label product? So that's it.
Yep.
Hey, I wanted to talk about this. I keep saying I've been at that Tribe 7 meetup. There was actually a quote that someone just posted in Tribe 7, or a screenshot, excuse me, that they posted just a couple of days ago. Someone who's gone through the Tribe 7 coaching. And this person, Kosh, said, I applied the training Gary Ray teaches. I will let the image speak for itself. The best month I've ever had, managed to remove stale inventory and made some losses, but the newer inventory that went into my account, boom, boom, boom in sales. I was averaging 5 units a day, now around 8 to 10. Thank you for your teaching. I still feel it's a privilege that you let me be part of the Seller Tribe 7. This is how we do it group. So, and for the month, they were at like 18,000. And on the screenshot, you can see the growth. So that's the kind of stories I love to hear. People who are literally doubling their business because of the training that Gary and Gay put out in Tribe 7. So I always like to give them a shout out because that's the vision Andy and I had when we partnered with Gay originally to build the Amazon Seller Tribe, was to help people build businesses that they could then use the free cash flow to create their own brands eventually. And some people have already gone on to do that. Some people have just continued to scale up their arbitrage business in a way that we actually originally never really envisioned. And that's completely fine. Now they're doing 5, some people close to 10 million in arbitrage, like all the more power to you, right? If you can do that. But I think most people eventually still will use that free cash flow to go on and do additional activities. So I always love to look at that. And then I wanted to brag a little bit on AMZ Pro. I get a weekly report from AMZ Pro, even though it's part of our thing. I still get a report every week for our actual brand. And there was one SKU we have that got 63 units reimbursed for us this past week. So every week I get a lifetime reimbursement and then a weekly reimbursement out. Well, this week there was a SKU that got 63 units reimbursed. High ticket item, we got $5,668.74 back from this one reimbursement that I'm not sure how long it was sitting there, but if I had never caught it after 18 months, it would be gone, right? And what's crazy about that number is Andy and I have launched brand new brands, and like before we had our current brand, for under $5,000, right? So literally a new private label brand potentially, or a new product of ours for the brand we're working on now, we will be able to launch for equivalent to that amount of money. So I love it. Abs, thanks for joining me today. Thanks for filling in for Andy. Actually, we'll say maybe people are like, where is Andy? Andy is on the way to, where is it? Cabo, Mexico, right? Yeah. So Cabo, he is on the way to Cabo. The benefit of running an Amazon business, he is packing up with his family and going on a little vacation to Mexico. And so that's what you get to do, I guess, when you are able to build things up. Have VAs and, now to, extrapolate that out further, when you build the team and have, all that going on, you can do those sorts of things. So Andy should be back next week. Avs, thanks for filling in. It was great to get your insight. Really appreciate your time. All right, guys, catch you on the next episode of the Amazing Freedom Podcast.